disaster! I pay my taxes for this! You need to fix this right now! I demand to see your supervisor!
We understand your frustration, but...
Look at this right here! It clearly states you cannot be doing this!
Ma'am, if you would just listen...
Don't tell me to calm down!
We will not tolerate this violation of the community codes any longer. The damage to the creek is unacceptable, and we demand that.
Back away from the tape, sir, the city inspector barked. Back away from my property, now, I shot back, pointing at the mud where my grass used to be. Karen, pearls, clipboard, hurricane of hairspray, shoved between us. He is non-compliant, she snarled, waving a printout like it was a court order. The board has authority. I laughed. You do not even have authority over your own sinking castle, Karen. She turned scarlet. Sirens wailed down the block. Water lapped at her designer flats. Viewers, tell me I am wrong. I say to you, yeah, you with the earbuds, does this look like community standards or a train wreck with a logo? The inspector glanced from the buckling curb to the concrete-choked ditch. Ma'am, if you poured anything into a natural drain. We mitigated, she snapped. You detonated, I said. That is when the mailbox floated by like a bad omen and the shouting stopped. I did not wake up wanting a war. After 12 hours welding pipe under crawl spaces, peace was a folding chair, a cheap beer, and a skinny creek whispering through reeds. I never caught more than a curious bluegill, and that was fine. The water kept time, the dragonflies did crowd control. Simple. Then the lines on the subdivision map moved like goalposts. Beige boxes annexed the creek side. The HOA oozed in with welcome notices that read like fines with smiley faces. Karen arrived first. Pastel athleisure, no sweat, all attitude, calling my creek an unauthorized water feature. I showed her the deed. I quoted county regs. She wrote non-compliant in bubble letters and left perfume and rage in the doorway. Question for the chat. Have you ever seen someone so sure, so loud, and so wrong? The first paper was blue tape on my door. Unsafe open water. Non-native wildlife. Translation. Frogs exist. Fix in 72 hours. I ignored it. The second paper screamed 100 a day and a mandatory inspection. 3 strangers came with tape measures and phones, staying just shy of the water like it was radioactive. Karen hovered at the property line, toe-tapping like a metronome set to annoy. A week later, a meeting where she declared my creek a hazard by PowerPoint, insurance risk, erosion, mosquitoes, the apocalypse. She handed me options: fence it, fill it, or pay for weekly inspections. I kept my voice polite and told her exactly where she could file that packet. Neighbors stared at their laps. The projector hummed, and somewhere deep in my gut, a switch flipped from tolerate to document. Wednesday dawned with coffee and a new sound, a concrete drum growling closer. A truck backed down the side alley like it owned the easement. Neon vest guy guided the chute over the upper bend. Work order from the HOA, he said, not meeting my eyes. The slurry hit the water, and the creek choked in a heartbeat. Reeds vanished under gray glue. Frogs launched and lost. I slipped, bled, yelled, waved the deed, and got the same answer from every face. Just doing the job. When the drum finally silenced, my creek was a scar. Hard, ugly, wrong. Karen watched from the sidewalk with her arms folded like she had just checkmated gravity. I wiped mud from my eyes, stood up straight, and smiled back. Round 1 to her. Rounds 2 through 12? Mine. Then it rained. Not a sprinkle. A hard, honest wall of water. Normally the creek would sip the runoff, shrug, and carry it out. Instead, the sheet hit concrete, bounced, stalled, and climbed the yard like a slow, stupid tide. Puddles mapped new borders. By noon, the sidewalk was ankle deep. Across the street, Karen stood under an umbrella big enough to shade a county fair, pretending the lake around her rose bushes was a feature. 2 storms later, basements coughed up carpets, sandbags guarded porches, and Maple Drive turned into a kiddie pool full of mulch and regret. Every time the HOA blasts blamed homeowners, Bad grading, dirty drains, failure to maintain. Funny how nobody mentioned the mitigation that blocked the only natural exit the water had. I shut my mouth and opened a notebook. I played polite in meetings and relentless outside. Nikon on the neck, I walked after storms and took pictures that did not blink. Submerged mailboxes, new rivers cutting through common areas, brown halos creeping up garage doors. I flew an old drone when the sky cleared, mapping how water wanted to move and how it could not. In comment sections, people argued about flower beds and soccer balls. On the street, neighbors who used to swap brisket rubs traded complaint forms. Karen loved the noise, it hid the signal. But data does not care about drama. Water lines are honest witnesses. Viewers, this is where you hit pause and ask, if the story keeps repeating, is it user error or the system? You want the receipts? I dug into a dusty blue envelope my granddad left with the property. Inside, 1,952 surveys, a 1,978 letter from the Water Authority granting a permanent natural drainage easement and state protection notices for the watershed. Gold. Not YouTube gold, legal gold. I filed inspection requests with the county and city. Then I built a burner packet for the press. Drone stills, timestamps, easement scans, side-by-sides of before creek and after concrete. I dropped it to every newsroom and the nosy Facebook group that booted me last year. Did I name names? I named facts. Let investigators connect the dots. My voice on camera is not the point. The creek's voice is 3 days later, a white county truck rolled up with a second city vehicle behind it. 2 inspectors stepped into boots and started working the site like surgeons. They measured the slab, bagged soil, followed the slope, frowned at the scum line on the curb. Inside, I poured coffee and answered questions with receipts. Outside, they shot photos from angles Karen's slideshow had never considered. Where did the water go when you blocked its path? They did not say much when they left. They did not have to. That night, a 30-second segment hit the evening news. Unauthorized alterations may have worsened flooding. No names, just a drone shot of a neighborhood pretending not to be a swamp. The comments lit up like a pinball machine. Karen called an emergency board meeting the next day. I sat in the back with a hat pulled low and a binder fat enough to be its own zip code. She stormed the mic, accused the city of slander, the county of bias, the media of clickbait, and me of sabotage without saying my name. A quiet board member asked for a permit. Karen said there was verbal approval. The projector flicked to photos from my packet, concrete pouring into a mapped easement, code sections highlighted in red. The room stopped breathing. Here's a tip for power junkies. When the screenshots start showing up at your own meeting, you are not managing a narrative. You are starring in evidence. Then the thud of envelopes. Official red tags nailed to a dozen doors, including Karen's. Unsafe structure. Occupancy restricted. Insurance adjusters arrived with clipboards and smiles that did not reach their eyes. Negligence, they said, and the word denied sprouted like mold. Families stood in raincoats, whispering, "Where do we go tonight?" Movers clogged the street. Karen hired a lawyer and tried to shout the tide back into the gutter. The tide did not listen. Viewers, if you have ever wondered what the sound of an idea dying is, it is paperwork ripping in a wet parking lot. The HOA tried a new mask, a flood task force with fees attached. They dumped gravel, like aspirin on a broken leg. They emailed at 2 a.m. about extraordinary events and resilience and community spirit, which is HOA for pay again. Meanwhile, city crews started real inspections, clipboards that led to actions, not fines. And in the quiet corners of the internet, neighbors who never post started posting photos, dates, bills, stories. The board's quorum ghosted. The newsletter went from smug to silent. Karen's kingdom shrank to a folding table and an empty podium. I was not gloating. Okay, I smiled. But mostly, I kept working the list. I matched storm totals to flood photos. I paired easement scans with foundation cracks. I gathered 3 short interviews, 1 contractor, 1 surveyor, 1 retired city engineer, who all said the same soft sentence: you never block a natural drain. The second wave of news used sharper language: illegal, reckless, penalties. A local watchdog group launched a petition. The county taped violation notices to the community center doors. Neighbors finally asked me, face to face, "What now?" I pointed at the creek that used to be and said, "We listen." The next meeting was a funeral with fluorescent lighting. A handful of soaked residents voted to dissolve the HOA. No speeches, no cake. Just hands up, eyes down, and a ledger that read $2.3 million in potential liabilities and 0 assets. A marshal watched Karen drag shredded boxes to a car that should have been a metaphor, but was not. It was just sad. The city seized a domain. The county froze an account. The concrete did not move. Not yet. The water kept whispering the same word: start. Restoration did not come in a day, and it did not come from a truck. It came from a Saturday morning line of volunteers who wanted their yards back and their lungs clear. We cut and hauled and chipped until the slab blinked daylight. We laid stone where water wanted to turn. We planted willow, switchgrass, and local sedges that drink like champs. The creek tasted its old bed again, slow, then sure, then singing. Dragonflies clocked in on day 3. Frogs took attendance at dusk. A kid in rain boots shouted, "It is back," and the whole block pretended they had dust in their eyes. City and county brought grants and guidelines, not lectures. They taught us the shape of a ditch that does not drown you. We learned words we should have learned years ago: swale, percolation, riprap, headwater. We built not to pretty, but to work. And guess what? Working looks gorgeous when it is green and alive. If you are watching this and thinking, could we do that here? The answer is yes, with help, with patience, and without a Karen. When the creek finally ran clear in late afternoon light, I carved a small sign and sunk it at the bend Karen hated most. The letters are not fancy, but they do not have to be. Nature always wins. People read it, nod, and take pictures. Some post them with long captions about accountability. Some just let the shot stand. The sign is not a victory lap. It is a traffic sign for the soul. Yield to the obvious. Karen left in an RV that leaned like a tired dog. No parade, no next-door farewell thread. Her McMansion wore a red tag and a sheen of swamp like a bad spray tan. New families moved in on higher ground, with eyes open. We told them the short version. There used to be a creek. Then there was not. Now there is. They brought lemonade to volunteer days and asked better questions than we used to. That is the real fix. Not the willow, not the stone. The questions. So here's yours. Audience, what are you ignoring because a loud paper told you to? If water is tapping at your door, do not argue with it. Do not pave its mouth shut and invoice your neighbor. Walk the line after the storm. Note the truth. It is not poetic. It is practical. The creek is not mystical. It is a system. Treat it right. It carries you. Treat it wrong. It carries you away. If you stayed with me this far, drop flow in the comments so I know you get it. Share this with the one neighbor who thinks rules are the same as reality. And the next time a clipboard tells you the sky is dry while the rain soaks your socks, hand them a map, not a fight. Because the land remembers. It waits. And when the time is right, it takes attendance, with or without your permission. "Ma'am, step away from the easement," the county inspector said, voice flat like a gavel. Karen planted her heels. "This is a private community. We have authority." "No," he replied, pointing at the muddy trench. "The state has authority over natural drainage." The city engineer lifted a core sample like a smoking shell. Portland cement, 4 to 6 inches thick. No permit, no erosion mat, no underdrain. Who approved this? Karen jabbed at me. He sabotaged it. The inspector did not even blink. Cool story. Where's your paperwork? Silence. Viewers, you can hear a neighborhood hold its breath. The engineer marked the slab with orange paint. Cut here. Karen tried a last swing. You will hear from our attorney, and the inspector swung back. Great. Have them bring a pump. That is when a frog croaked loud from a gutter and half the crowd laughed by accident. The spell broke. Authority shifted on a single joke. You felt it. I did. Did you? They did not leave. They multiplied. Trucks with city seals, county seals, state plates, tripods, levels, chalk lines. A drone of their own. They traced the path water should take, then mapped the places it could not. Every red pin on their tablet matched a photo in my binder. When the engineer asked for historical surveys, I slid the 1,952 sheets across my workbench. He whistled. Granddad kept receipts. I nodded. He kept the creek. We walked the line to the alley where the truck had backed in. The tire ruts were still fossilized in the clay. He took a photo, then another from ground level. If you are watching this, I tell you, remember, storms erase lies, but they do not erase tracks. The inspector snapped a final shot of the HOA's mitigation plan, a PDF with clip art raindrops and 0 stamps, and said the words that changed everything. We are escalating. Karen went on offense the only way she knew how. Emails at midnight, long and loud, subject line in all caps. Misinformation, hysteria, we will not be bullied. She CC'd everyone, then BCC'd the same people again. A rumor started that I hacked the weather, another that I bribed the news with barbecue. Cute. Meanwhile, certified letters landed like bricks in the HOA mailbox. Notice of investigation. Cease and desist. Access required for inspection. Somebody tried to spin that as good news. See? They said. We are important enough to investigate. Folks, if the fire marshal wants to visit your kitchen, that is not a Michelin star. That is smoke. The first follow-up storm hit hard and fast, like a test the neighborhood had not studied for. City pumps came late but loud. One crew set steel plates over a failed manhole that burped like a sick tuba. Another crew opened a blocked curb inlet, and a dirty waterfall screamed down the slope. My drone flew and fed the map. Arrows where water wanted to go, X marks where it hit the concrete, circled zones where it rose and fought back. I narrated for you live. Left side, see that boil? That is trapped groundwater, finding a new door. At scale, that door becomes a hallway, then a room, then congratulations, you live in a basement that thinks it is a lake. Karen marched up midstream and tried to slap my phone. She missed, skidded, and grabbed a mailbox like a dancer with stage fright. The camera kept rolling. The internet did the rest. 3 days later, the news van parked under a leaning oak and set up a stand-up shot with the creek scar in frame. The reporter did not need me. The neighborhood spoke. Mrs. Jensen showed her ruined carpet. Mr. Alvarez held a cracked section of retaining wall like a broken rib. A kid splashed in street water and asked if school counted it as PE. The segment went wide. Not viral, not yet, but wide enough that the regional station called the next morning asking for long form. That is TV4, we think you have a plot. I told them I had more than that. I had dates. I had elevations. I had letters with seals. Bring a pair of boots, I said. You will ruin nice shoes. The city posted the first red placards that afternoon. Let me be clear, nobody cheers for that. Red means pain. Red means couches on porches and plastic totes that smell like bleach. Red means kids asking where the dog will sleep. But red also means truth big enough to read from the curb. Karen met the inspector on her steps with a lawyer who looked like he wished he were at lunch. You cannot do this, she snapped. The inspector pointed at the easement, then at the slab, then at the cracks marching up her stucco like bad math. Ma'am, the ground is doing it. He taped the door. The camera caught the strip pull tight, and the wind flutter it like a flag, a signal more honest than any logo. Insurance adjusters descended in a flock of windbreakers. They did not say sorry, they said policy. They said maintenance failure. They said excluded loss. One man shook his head at a hallway seam and wrote 3 words: pre-existing condition. I want to be mad at them. I cannot. Their job is a line drawn in ink. Ours was a river blocked in concrete. On the sidewalk, I kept my mouth shut and my lens open. Karen's loyalists stopped meeting my eyes. One slipped me a stack of emails, pressure to vote fines through without quorum, threats to make examples, a PDF titled Escalation Script. The file name stuck to my brain like a burr. Make it hurt final V7. If you are editing evil in version 7, maybe close the laptop. The board tried theater to take back the room. They rented a U-Haul of sandbags and lined them like teeth across driveways for a photo op. They issued a community resilience plan with stock photos of smiling families in dry cul-de-sacs. Then the county posted a notice of violation on the community center door, and the stock photos looked like jokes taped to a fire exit. That night, the meeting hit capacity, not with cheerleaders, but with faces that looked tired. Karen opened with a speech about outside agitators. A hand in row 3 raised. Which outside? The rain? Laughter. Not cruel, just real. She tried to cut the mic. The power tripped instead. The room went dim. Phones lit up like fireflies. People kept talking anyway. I brought the blue folder. Not to wave it like a trophy, but to end a rumor war with facts. I described each document like a recipe. Ingredient, date, authority, effect. This letter, I said, means you cannot do what you did. This map means the water belongs where you put a wall. This code section means fines do not turn concrete into soil. I was not loud. I did not need to be. The county engineer stood at the back and nodded so small only the front row saw. Then a deputy read a short statement. The creek corridor would be opened, the slab cut, grading restored, pending an emergency order. A woman gasped, hope, not fear. Karen shouted takeover, and someone finally asked her, by who? The river? It got uglier before it got better. A few houses failed fast. Foundations sheared. Garage floors smiled upward in a hard grimace. A moving truck sank to its axles and had to be winched out by a grumpy man with a tattoo that said mud is greater than HOA. A realtor took photos of a teardown opportunity and nearly got run off the block. I kept filming, but I also carried boxes. You help, or you do not belong. That is not politics, that is a neighborhood. Viewers, this is the part where you do not clap. You show up with gloves. Then came the turning. City backhoes kissed the slab with diamond teeth, and the creek coughed awake. We watched the first cut like a patient squeezing a hand post-surgery. Water nosed the gap, tried it, liked it, and rushed. The smell changed in a single minute, from swamp freezer to clean earth. Crews laid core logs and stone. Volunteers planted willow cuttings along the bend. We wove straw wattles like we were braiding hair. A kid wrote HI and seed mix on a bare patch, and we left it like a promise. From the porch, I told you, this is what repair looks like. Not perfect, not quick, but right. Karen tried one last move, a press conference on the community center steps. She brought a podium with a cheap seal, 2 men with crossed arms, and a stack of talking points that died on contact with a hard question. Did you have a permit? She pivoted to feelings. The reporter pivoted to facts. The engineer says, he is wrong. The map says, fake. The county letter from 1978, irrelevant. The camera zoomed wider to show the red tag on the door behind her. That is framing, folks. You cannot argue with an object in the shot. The special board session to stabilize governance took 7 minutes and 3 seconds. A motion to suspend fines passed by a wave of exhausted hands. A motion to release records failed because there were no records that mattered. Then the motion that ended it. Dissolve the HOA. No ceremony, no plaque. Just an old man's voice. Let's stop doing harm. Approved. Karen boxed her files, shredded what she could, and left in a car that had seen better paint. A marshal watched the whole thing with a face like a blank page. We all wrote our own line on it on the way out. Enough. What comes after a bad idea dies? Work. Grants arrived with boring names and beautiful effects. The county hydrologist gave us slope numbers like sheet music. We tuned the channel. Not arrow straight, not wild, curves that slow, pockets that sink. We built a tiny floodplain where the lawn once fought to be a carpet. We swapped showy exotics for plants that drink and hold. Somebody asked if the frogs would come back. A frog answered before I could. The neighborhood laughed, not at anyone, but with something bigger than us humming under our feet. We held a town night with clipboards and pizza. No speeches. Stations. Know your easement. How to read a flood map. What to plant where water rests. The engineer held a jar of soil and a jar of gravel and poured water through each to show the point without a single PowerPoint slide. Kids pressed their noses to a tray of macroinvertebrates like it was a zoo. I pointed at the old photos, pinned to a foam board, my yard, pre-slab, and said to you, "This is not nostalgia. It is a manual that was here before us." Karen? She moved. People always ask me what she said last. Nothing I remember. There was a cardboard box, a tired purse, an RV with a slow leak, and a street that did not watch her go so much as watch the sky for new weather. Her house sits half-eaten by the same water she tried to master. Some call that karma. I call it physics with a memory. Either way, it teaches. I planted one sign at the bend, then another at the alley, because people need reminders where trouble starts. The words are not fancy. Nature always wins. Folks take selfies with them. Kids trace the letters. A neighbor asked if it was smug. I shook my head. It is a seatbelt sign. Wear it. If you are still here, drop seatbelt in the comments so I know you get it. Not for me, for the next person reaching for a mixer of rules and concrete like it is a recipe. It is not. The recipe is water plus time plus respect. Last thing, if you want a checklist, here's mine. Walk your block after rain. Photograph the truth. Print your maps. Know your easements. Keep your blue envelope. Learn the names of the plants that drink hardest. Meet your inspectors before you need them. When a clipboard says, "Trust me," ask, "Show me." When a logo says, "We decide," say, "We live here." And when the creek asks for room, do not call it a feature. Call it what it is, the oldest road in town. Because the land remembers. It waits. And when you are ready to stop arguing with gravity and start listening, it will carry the whole street forward, quiet, steady, without a single violation notice needed. Read the permit out loud. The county inspector said, "Eyes on Karen, not the paper." "There is no permit," a board member whispered, and just like that, the room detonated. Voices colliding, chairs scraping, the projector throwing my drone shots on the wall like receipts in a courtroom. "Quiet," Karen barked, cheeks raw, hair haloed with rain frizz. "This is slander." I pointed at the orange paint the engineer had sprayed across the slab. "Cut, here." "Call it what you want," I told her, speaking to you two viewers, but the ground calls it evidence. The city rep clicked his pen. Unauthorized modification. Potential wetland impact. Civil exposure pending. Karen fired back. Outside agitators. Weaponized media. Fake environmentalism. The inspector tilted his head. "Ma'am, gravity is not partisan." You could feel the neighborhood lean, away from a podium, toward a flood map. That was the moment her badge stopped being a shield and became a prop. By dusk, the first story aired. 30 seconds of muddy truth. Aerial footage. Roofs floating on a brown mirror. Cul-de-sacs remade as ponds. My concrete scarred bend, dead center. No names. Not yet. Just captions. Unauthorized changes suspected. The comments lit up like a pinball machine. Some defended Karen, doing her best. Others posted screenshots of violation emails sent at 2 a.m. A firefighter wrote, "Water finds the liar." The next morning, a certified letter bulged in my mailbox, notice of investigation, and a near identical one choked the HOAs. Ours had stamps, theirs had panic. Karen stormed the emergency session with a stack of papers that looked official until the projector threw my packet behind her. The poor, the maps, the code sections in red. Board members who once nodded like bobbleheads stared at the carpet. When one asked for written permission, Karen's mouth snapped shut, and the mic picked up the quietest sound in the world. A leader running out of script. Night 2. The coverage grew teeth. Illegal, reckless, penalties. People finally spoke into cameras they used to avoid. Mrs. Jensen held a ruined carpet like a seaweed net. Mr. Alvarez touched a crack on his wall like it might purr and stop. A watchdog group rolled a petition that gathered signatures faster than the storm gathered clouds. The county taped violations to the community center door. The tape fluttered like a small, insistent flag. Inspectors knocked. Not to count lawn flamingos, but to check slabs and sump pumps. Lawsuits brewed like dark coffee. Negligence, property damage, maybe more. Karen tried to frame it as persecution, but you cannot cosplay victimhood while standing on a stage you built. Loyalists peeled off quietly. The quorum thinned. The newsletter tone shifted from chirpy to cryptic to silent. I watched from my porch like I always do. Same chair, same thermos, same creak, that once whispered peace, now roaring consequence. Then the citations hit, thick envelopes with government letterheads that do not joke. Karen's face when she opened hers? I did not see it, but I heard about it, a sound like air leaving a tire. By afternoon, the city hung red tags on a dozen doors. UN-safe structure, UN-stable foundation, occupancy restricted. Translation: your house is a story on stilts, and the story ends in water. Families stood in raincoats under gutters that no longer worked, reading orange they did not order. Movers idled. Kids held pets like passports. On Karen's porch, the inspector pointed at cracks that braided up her stucco and said, "The ground is making your case for us." She called a lawyer. The lawyer checked the tag, the easement, the pour photos, and later, the exit. Insurance arrived in a flock of windbreakers and clauses. Adjusters poked drywall, measured humidity, sniffed mold, and wrote math that began with excluded. Acts of negligence, they said. Failure to maintain drainage. Denied, denied, denied. Without checks, repairs turned into prayers. Mortgages did not care. They never do. Windows bloomed foreclosure notices like paper ghosts. Karen's Greek column fantasy took the first condemnation, and by month's end, she lived in a borrowed RV near the dead end, wheels sinking into the same mud she unleashed. That is the part nobody posts. The quiet, stupid sorrow of a living room turned into a storage unit, a photo album that smells like a basement, a child asking if condemned means we did something wrong. The HOA died as badly as it lived. No dignity, no learning, no last-minute spine. In a gutted community center, lit like a bad cafeteria, the leftovers voted to dissolve. No speeches. No banners. Just hands raised, like enough. Karen tried to object. The marshal standing by the door was the period at the end of her sentence. The treasurer read numbers that sounded like a dirge. 2.3 million in liabilities, 0 assets, bankruptcy imminent. Motion. Second. Approved. On the way out, Karen dragged boxes of shredded paper past the red notice that said more than her years of newsletters ever did. Her empire had been rules and asphalt. She poured it into concrete and called it order. The land filed an appeal and won. But the story did not end with a death. It pivoted to a choice. Patch the broken model that broke us, or listen to the map our feet stand on. We voted to restore the natural drain. The county brought small grants with big returns. The hydrologist arrived with a laser level and the calm of a math teacher. Slope, capacity, roughness, retention. He turned our common area into a giant teachable moment. We learned the words we should have learned before we learned violation. Swale, percolation, coir, riprap, floodplain bench. Volunteers lined up, people who had once scowled at each other in meetings now passing shovels like bread. We cut trenches, peeled scars, and planted native green that drinks like a marathoner. Willow roots found the water before our eyes did. The creek tested the curve, approved it, and sang. That first clear run was a throat clearing from the earth. Dragonflies clocked in like tiny helicopters with better politics. Frogs punched in a baritone chorus. Kids returned with boots and sticks and science questions. We set wattles, built check dams, and tucked seed under straw blankets like tucking in a tired child. The city posted a new sign at the community center that meant something. Community Watch. Actual neighbors, not cosplay cops. We hosted Know Your Easement Night. No PowerPoints, just jars of soil and gravel and a hose. The hydrologist poured, the water proved the point, and 3 grandmothers nodded like they had known it all along. A man who once voted to fine me for a welcome sign carried mulch and said, "Sorry." I said, "Thanks." The creek did not require apologies. It required room. I carved the sign at the bend with a cheap knife and a steady hand. Nature always wins. I set it where Karen's clipboard once pointed. People read it like a punchline, then like a prayer. Some call it smug. It is not. It is a seatbelt sign. You buckle before the crash, not after. New families moved in and did not ask for the long version. They just saw the wetland breathing and said, good. The abandoned McMansion slumped into the soft, honest future it earned, half swallowed by a marsh it had tried to deny. Tourists of tragedy never came. The news cycle spun on. We stayed, and staying is its own headline. Residents remain. Creek recovered. Sanity returns. As for Karen, she left without a speech, towing a wounded RV behind a truck that needed work it would not get. No farewell post, no last stand. Just a taillight blinking through mist and a round of breaths we did not know we had been holding. I do not toast her. I do not curse her. She is a paragraph in a lesson plan we will keep teaching. Never build policy on a lie about physics. The board that cheered her learned the expensive way that fines do not float and concrete does not negotiate. The county learned we will pick up the phone before we pick up pitchforks. And I learned that a quiet man with a camera and a folder can be loud enough without shouting. If you are still here, drop flow one more time in the comments so I know you carried this to the end. Then do one thing tomorrow. Walk your block after the rain. Track the truth with your eyes, not your inbox. Print the flood map. Find the easement lines. Meet the inspector before you need to. Learn 3 plants that drink hard. Teach one neighbor what a swale is. Clipboards will still show up. Logos will still promise order, and someone will always think a straight line is smarter than a curve. Smile. Hand them a jar of soil and a jar of gravel. Pour water. Let gravity argue your case. Most nights now, I end where this started. On the porch, chair creaking, thermos warm. The creek threads silver through the reeds. The frogs rehearse. The mailbox, resurrected, stands like a tiny lighthouse that survived the flood. I run my fingers over the carved letters on the little wooden sign. They are not a threat or a victory lap. They are maintenance. A reminder that our job was not to win an argument, it was to make room for an old road to reopen. The land remembers. It waits. It forgives, too, but only if you move. And when you do, it carries you. Not with drama or headlines, but with the soft, stubborn mercy of water going where it always meant to go.